After that, a group of archaeologists is hard at work in Israel's Jordan Park as they continue their meticulous investigation of the Golan Heights region. The air is filled with the sounds of tools sparking against stone. Because they have been excavating this particular site, known as Tell, for decades, the researchers are also a relatively common sight for any locals who happen to be passing by. However, on this particular day, the group on Earth made a truly remarkable discovery. In addition, they will discover that the approximately 3,000-year-old artifact may have served as the setting for one of Jesus Christ's most well-known miracles. An incredible artifact has been discovered by archaeologists at the location where Jesus fed the 5,000 people. This amazing object was discovered by archaeologists on the Jordan River banks, north of the Sea of Galilee. In addition, 3 of Jesus' disciples are said to have come from a fishing village called Bethsaida, which is mentioned in the New Testament book of John, and is said to have been right on this very seashore. Experts believe, moreover, that they have identified the site of this ancient settlement in the Tell area. In fact, the 20-strong international team of archaeologists, led by the University of Nebraska, is Professor Rami Iraf, have claimed that the site's history long precedes the appearance of Jesus some 2,000 years ago. Iraf believes, for example, that the location existed at the time of the Old Testament's King David, so around 3,000 years ago or so, and in the RAV's view, let's say to maybe the same place as the city of Zurich that's mentioned in the Old Testament. He explained the situation in a July 2019 interview with the Jerusalem Post, saying Bethsaida was the name of the city during the Second Temple period, but during the First Temple period, it was the city of Zurich. And to lend further weight to his words, he pointed out that the Old Testament's book of Joshua mentions that very settlement. So if the site that Iraf and his colleagues have been exploring is indeed the New Testament's Bethsaida, as well as the Old Testament, sir, then it's a location of great significance to those who belong to both the Christian and Jewish faiths. But there's a problem. You see, another team of archaeologists has been excavating a different site nearby and claim that they have discovered bethsaida. We'll come back to that controversy about the true location of Bethsaida later. But for now, let's find out more about the famous biblical city. As we've seen, RAV's team believes that the location they've identified could be the same site upon which 01 stood. And the archaeological remains that they found so far indicate that substantial fortifications once protected this earlier city from potential invaders. What's more, RAV believes that Sar was standing at the time of King David, who the Old Testament claims was Israel's second king after Saul. The future ruler started from humble beginnings, although he transformed from a simple shepherd into a hero when he slayed the giant Philistine Goliath. Then, according to the Bible, after Saul had passed away, David ascended to the throne some 3,000 years ago. In fact, Iraf theorizes that Exer may not even have been an Israeli city at all when David was Israel's ruler. Instead, the scholar, along with others, has put forward the idea of that the settlement was in fact Iranian, and perhaps this notion isn't too far-fetched. After all, the Iranians were a successful people who ruled various kingdoms in the Middle East while David was on the throne. A piece of evidence founded at Tell seemingly supports this theory too, specifically a pair of tombstones that are believed to be around me and in origin have been unearthed there. These gravestones, or astel, are each carved with a moon deity in the shape of a bull. Similar stones have been found in other parts of the ancient world, to including Egypt and modern-day Turkey. But the two uncovered in Bethsaida likely date from around 3,100 years ago, and this in turn may mean that the city was part of Gestur and Iranian kingdom, also mentioned in the Old Testament. Yet we still don't know for sure whether Xar was Israelite or Iranian territory. Whoever controlled the city, though seemingly lost power over the settlement at some point over the next millennia. According to the New Testament, by 2000 BC, the city had a new name, Bethsaida, and Bethsaida is described in the Bible as a place where Jesus lived, recruited disciples, and even performed one of his most famous miracles. According to the New Testament, Jesus journeyed to the shores of Galilee and found 3 of his 12 disciples, Philip, Andrew, and Peter. The Gospel of John says, "The next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, 'Follow me.' Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. And while this fact alone would have no doubt been enough to establish bethsaida as an important part of the Messiah story, the city actually takes on a far more central role, you see. Bethsaida was not only a fertile recruiting ground for Jesus, but it was also the scene of some of his most startling miracles. First of all, there is the parable of the blind man of Bethsaida. Although an account of this episode only appears in the Gospel of Mark, the relevant passages set the scene by first describing how the Messiah arrived in town with some of his followers. The text continues, "Some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, 'Do you see anything?' The blind man replies, 'I see people. They look like trees walking around.'" Mark's Gospel goes on. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home saying, "Don't even go into the village." And while this last phrase is somewhat enigmatic, Mark's words, nevertheless, make an astonishing claim. The Messiah had miraculously restored the blind man's sight. But Bethsaida is also said to be the site of one of Jesus' better-known miracles, the feeding of the 5,000. All 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke, mention this episode. A second miraculous meal, the feeding of the 4,000, was also recorded by Mark and Matthew, but this apparently took place somewhere close to Gerasenes when it comes to the feeding of the 5,000, though the Gospel of Luke specifies that Bethsaida was the backdrop. This version of the story starts off by saying, "Then Jesus took the disciples with him, and they withdrew by themselves to a town called Bethsaida." At this point, a throng of people apparently followed the Messiah and the disciples. Jesus then addressed the crowd, it said, and told them all about God's kingdom. Luke's Gospel continues by describing how the disciples subsequently asked Jesus to send his audience home, as there was neither food nor shelter for them at the spot where they gathered. And Jesus' reply puzzled his 12 disciples. "You give them something to eat," he said, as there were around 5,000 people in attendance. This response quite understandably flummoxed the 12 at first. The dozen disciples then protested to Jesus, "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all this crowd." The Gospel claims that the Messiah seemed unfazed by this, however, and he went on to instruct his followers to organize the crowd into separate groups of around 50. And then, or so the story goes, the miracle happened. According to Luke's Gospel, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, Jesus gave thanks and broke them. Next, Jesus gave the loaves and fishes to the disciples to share among the people. And although you would expect these scant supplies to leave 1,000 hungry, that was apparently far from the case. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. Luke's Gospel states, somehow, 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread had been enough to sate a crowd of 5,000 people. So as 3 of Jesus' disciples hailed from Bethsaida, and 2 of his miracles also reportedly happened there, it's easy to see why Christians regard the city as a key Holy Land location. And in fact, today, the purported site of Bethsaida has become something of a pilgrimage destination, with 1,000s apparently flocking daily to Tel in the Golan Heights to see it for themselves. In light of RAV's 2019 discovery at Tel, then the city may perhaps become an even more appealing destination for pilgrims. You see, at the location, the archaeological team unearthed an ancient city gate to rare find. Indeed, there are not many gates from capital cities in this country from this period arrived, told the Jerusalem Post in July 2019. And this was the second historic gate that the team had discovered. As it turns out, the rabbi and his colleagues had uncovered the first gate in 2018, and he believes that this artifact may date from the time known as the First Temple period. That era is named for the Temple of Solomon and is generally said to have lasted from around 1000 BCE to 586 BCE. This was succeeded by the Second Temple era, which is generally believed to have been heralded by the destruction by the Babylonian king the Budget, and as are two of King Solomon's temple in 587 BCE, and Arrive told the Jerusalem Post that the second gate may have been constructed during the time of the Old Testament's King David. If this is true, then this ancient object would come from the Second Temple period. By this point, of course, the city would no longer have been called Exer. Instead, it would have gone by the moniker of Bethsaida, the city that Jesus knew so well. The RAV's assertion that this Tell site is indeed the biblical city of Bethsaida has had a dramatic impact in the last few years too, as hordes of visitors have subsequently flocked to the site in Jordan Park. Even the park's director, A.V. Lieberman, was stunned by this turn of events. According to a 2018 article by the Jerusalem Post, he said, "I am amazed each time by the arrival of thousands of evangelical visitors to Bethsaida." But as we mentioned earlier, there is one key problem with the RAV's discovery. Not everyone agrees that the archaeologist has really found the site of Bethsaida. In fact, there are two other experts who believe that honor actually belongs to them. The competing sites also lie to the north of the Sea of Galilee, with each boasting their own archaeological discoveries. One is at El Araj, the other can be found at LMS Jaya, and out of the two locations, the former appears to have the more convincing claim. The team of archaeologists has been working at the El Mirage site, located in the Peseta Valley Nature Reserves, since 2014, and the researchers have seemingly convinced at least one news outlet that they've discovered the truth of Sita Yes. In 2017, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz headlined an article with "The last city of Jesus' apostles has just been found," archaeologists say. But the piece in question referred to the dig at El Araj, not at Tell. The team at El Mirage was led by Dina Shalom, Mordecai Aviam, and Dr. Stephen Notley with Notley, hailing from Nyack College in New York, in 2016. They uncovered a bathhouse and other evidence of a Roman settlement that's believed to have spanned from the 1st century AD to the 3rd. Other finds at El Mirage include a coin made of silver and imprinted with the head of the Emperor Nero. And this is sordid evidence of a Roman presence at the site proved enough to prompt the researchers to declare that the settlement at El Mirage was a possible site for Bethsaida. After all, the biblical city was believed to have been Roman. Archaeologists have made this assumption after studying the works of a Jewish historian known as Josephus, who was writing as the 1st century AD came to an end. You see, Joseph is related how Philip the Tetrarch Herod, the great son, awarded Bethsaida the status of polis in 30 AD. This classification then meant that the settlement was officially recognized as a Greco-Roman city, and it stands to reason that any archaeologist who believes that they could have uncovered the site of Bethsaida would need evidence of Roman occupation from the early 1st century AD. If they want their claim to be taken seriously, that is, taking these conditions into consideration, then the respective sites of El Mirage and that Tell seem to be prime contenders for the ruins of Bethsaida. Yes, archaeologists have also found evidence of Roman influence at the Tell dig. Researchers there discovered a coin from the era of the aforementioned ruler, Philip the Tetrarch Church, as well as even further treasures. Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Give this video a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.